Local fans of a high-quality Bruins team, welcome back. We're doing mid-season player grades. They're a little ugly. They're a lot ugly. So I had this idea, we've done this before, but a couple of weeks ago, I was like, oh, I should do that, and it's a crazy couple of weeks, so I just been trying to take the time to actually put them together. And what really solidified me doing this video is The Athletic came out with their own player grades, which was just the player, the grade, and a 2-sentence blurb about them. And I thought, not to just dunk on The Athletic or anything like that, but I thought it was an awful article. It was really bad. It was super forgiving for all the stuff going on this season. Like, very, very forgiving. I think the lowest grade that was given was a C-, which is interesting. And I didn't appreciate the fact that it was just 2 sentences without any sort of in-depth thought about any of them. So I was like, okay, well, I'm definitely doing this, and let's make it just a bit more detailed. So I'm going to go over a couple of ground rules, and then we're going to start with our highest grades all the way down to the lowest. If it's matching highest grades or matching grades at all, there's no particular order for them. They're just in that grouping. But as usual, whenever I do videos like this, the grades are based off of expectation. Pastrnak and Peeke aren't being graded on the same curve. A grade of C is you're meeting expectations exactly. So C is not a bad grade. I don't want it to be viewed as a bad grade. It's just like, hey, that's what we expect from you, and that's what you're doing. Good, right? So, like, B's are above expectations, A's are you're blowing expectations out of the water for one reason or another. This isn't just about point totals and things like that. If you're being asked to play well above your station and you don't look like a true top-line guy, but you aren't a top-line guy, then we're taking those kind of things into account. There should be a little bit of leeway with those. I don't need to go over what a D or an F is. It's a bad grade. We are grading their on-ice impact. Injuries should not be considered, but we are going to try to address things that might be chronic, right? If someone is dealing with an injury, we're trying to give them a little more grace than we typically would if they were fully healthy. There will certainly be some gray area for some of these. This is my team, right? I'm a fan before anything else. So I'm trying to be as objective as possible, but these are also real humans, and I'm a real human. There's going to be certain things that I say that are likely going to be contradictory between two players, where I'm criticizing one for this, and then someone else is doing something similar, but there's some gray area with that kind of stuff. I'm doing my very best to be objective. I think I'm being as fair as possible, and if I'm in any way not, I am trying to explain it as best as I can so you understand where my head is at. This is just a fun list, man. If you don't like it, put your grades below, because I'd love to hear it. Disagreements are fine. This ain't an echo chamber. Let me know. Keep it civil, but let me know. Just remember, each player is its own case by case. And I'm going to ask you, before I say it, who do you think is the highest graded player? And what do you think the highest grade on this team is? Which we're about to answer in 3, 2, 1. It's an A-. And we have 3 A- on the team. I bet that's probably a little higher than you would expect. But I feel like there are a couple guys who have been really tremendous. We have no A's, no A+. And I think that's very fair. So our first A-, we have 3 of them. Our first A- is Hampus Lindholm. 3 goals, 4 assists in 17 games played, a 33-point pace across 82 games before going down with a lower body injury. He's a -4 on the plus-minus. I hate the stat. We're going to talk about it a few times here, but being a positive plus-minus or a negative plus-minus doesn't really play a huge role in my mind. So as I will mention it, but please don't put a ton of stock in that for me. He was the best player on the ice for us early in the season, at a time when the team was drowning around him. In these games where the defensive structure was terrible, the offensive output was terrible, they were all over the place. And not a lot of that has changed. We have improved, albeit slightly, since his injury. But every night we talked about how he was the best player on the ice. He wasn't going to return to having these huge, crazy point totals. I don't think that was ever really on the playbook for him. But the expectation for him was, especially after last year where he had so many defensive zone starts and responsibilities that we just didn't get to see him advance too much in his role, it was to be a decent second pairing guy. A good second pairing guy, not a decent. And he just looked phenomenal to start the year. If anything, his injury, has pointed out it made it very obvious how well he was playing compared to his counterparts. Because that left side is a wasteland right now. It actually is kind of funny because you're like, oh, that's why they signed Zadorov, because it's really bad on the left side, except for Zadorov's part of the problem. The long-term outlook for Hampus, because I've added in a long-term outlook for every one of these grades. If he can come back and play at 100%, he becomes an instant boost for the squad at a high level. A Lindholm-Carlo pairing, or Lindholm-Mac, but Lindholm-Carlo is probably where I'd love to see it. If they can return to what they've been in years past, it would solidify a lot of roles on the roster, honestly. And that pairing going back to being excellent, there's just a lot of situations where you get to have a really effective defensive pairing. I know we'll talk about Carlo later, but beyond the boost offensively that you get from Hampus, you would just shore up responsibilities across that bottom six. So, meaning the defenseman, not the bottom six. You know what I mean? Not the forward lines. So, I'm really looking forward to him coming back. I don't know what kind of shape he'll be in. I'm sure he'll have to work his way back into game speed, but he is one of the few A-minuses, and maybe that has to do with how much we miss him. Maybe there's a little bias in there, but that's our first one. Our second one is the elite man himself, Morgan Geekie. Morgan Geekie. Love to see it. 10 goals, 10 assists through 40 games played. He has 10 PIMs, 10 penalty minutes. He's on pace for a career high in points and goals. Doesn't take frequent penalties. And even though he was scratched for 5 games this year, he has really, really upped his game over the last month. Look, is an A- kind of silly for the guy? Sure. But we're talking about a third-line guy, in my opinion, and my expectation of him, who has been thrust into a top-line role and has been asked to not just hold his own, but be part of the solution. I'm as vocal as anyone when it comes down to his shortcomings in the offensive zone. Like, I'm right there with you. And I wouldn't even call him a stout defender. I really wouldn't. But he's picked it up offensively. He's been asked to play way above his station. And he's done everything you could possibly ask for, plus some. He's succeeding up there. Is he a true top-line talent? No, and the point totals don't say that either. But he's on a path for career highs. He's playing above his station, and he's playing difficult minutes. This guy deserves an A- for the situation alone. To be effective in it, even better. Long-term outlook for him? Maybe the Bruins are forced to offload him at the deadline if the team continues to free fall. But I know they'd prefer to keep him. That's very obvious with his versatility, and I think it's the likely scenario that they hold on to him. He's an RFA at the end of the season. I think they'll try to hold on to him unless it's truly we're moving him for a very high upside player back or very good draft capital. The last A- of the grouping is Justin Brazeau. I know. It's not the guys you would typically peg to be the higher grades, but 10 goals, 9 assists in 43 games played, a 38-point pace, second on the team in power play goals with 4. What was the expectation here? A third-line guy who could be on the second power play unit as a net front dude, not speedy, but if his line mates to get in the offensive zone and create offensive pressure, then he can get to the net front where he is an absolute weapon. He's then asked to play all over the lineup, bouncing around the middle six with different line mates. And as his line mates struggled around him, Brazeau never really did. He's just consistently been that net front guy who's responsible enough through all 200 feet of ice. He makes good decisions. He's not a line driver. He's not some crazy talent that's going to have these gaudy point totals. But you've looked at this guy who's making $750,000. He's 26 years old. This is his first full season, full NHL campaign, and you're getting almost 40 points out of him, or he's on pace for almost 40 points. That's excellent. That deserves a high grade in my book. Again, you could look at this and be like, wow, that's really generous for the guy. I don't think so. Situationally, what he's had to put up with and what his line mates have looked like, No, this guy deserves a real positive grade. A- feels appropriate to me. Long-term outlook, it's very simple. Extend him or trade him, but don't lose this guy for nothing. He has value to this team. I don't think he's playing his way into some huge contract, but he's definitely playing himself into a raise, and I think he's a guy you want to keep around unless he's truly priced himself out. We'll see, but I think they'd like to keep him. We'll move on to the next level of grades. There's no B+, there's no Bs, and there's no B-. Everyone else has either slightly gone above their expectations, has met expectations, or is below expectations. Everyone else. This is what I mean. I was not as generous as the Athletic was in their grades. Our first C+er is Mark Kastelic. They keep saying his name different ways, and it's bothering me. He's a C+. 4 goals, 8 assists, and 43 games played. A 23-point pace, 81 penalty minutes. My expectations for Kastelic was a guy who could handle fourth-line defensive duties and could stir the pot. He's done that. You're at a C pretty quickly with him, I think. And I think this is going to be a pushback one. I think a lot of people are going to talk about him as if he should have been a B. I like the extension. We'll get there. But he did explode into the season with the rest of the fourth line. He had 5 points and +8 rating through 5 games. Since then, he has 7 points and a -5 rating through the next 38. I understand he's a fan favorite, and I genuinely like the extension he signed. He's a good guy to keep around. But he's been part of the problem just as often as he's been part of the solution, if not more so, in my book. He takes way too many penalties. A good amount of them are offsetting, dual roughing, or a fighting major or something like that. Does get the occasional misconduct, so those are elevated a little bit. Because, sometimes you're looking at like, wow, he had 15 minutes of penalties. Yeah, but he didn't make a shorthanded at any given point. He fought somebody and got a misconduct. Like, that's fine. He gets a C+ because he's played the role as expected with some positive influence in moments on a bottom six that has been dog walked for large stretches of the season. He's been effective, and he's stayed effective. He deserves credit for looking more playable than his line mates most nights, but that's only worth a small boost to me, which gets him to the plus. The long-term outlook here, he should stay a solid fourth-line presence with the occasional, dang, he had a big goal in that one. That's fine. I do wish they would greenlight him a little more often going forward. And I know that he's a shit disturber. He gets in everyone's faces. But doesn't it sometimes feel like he's on a leash? Like that he's not allowed to put the fear of God in some of these guys? We've got some real rough and tough customers on our team. And it does feel like sometimes they could send a more severe message than they do. Do not hear that as like they should be injuring guys. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think I would like him to be a little more active in that stuff before games get out of hand. Because some of his most physical moments have been when we're already down 3 goals. It feels like he's on a leash sometimes. Another C+, and this one is a tough one for me. I put Jordan Oesterle here. 3 assists through 17 games played. He has a 0 ±, like an even ±, which is honestly better than I thought it was going to be through 17 games. He's not been good through decent stretches here, but he was also supposed to be a 7th D and has been asked to play top 4 minutes consistently and spent a bunch of time on the top pair. After, doing nothing for a few weeks, he just got chucked in the top pair with McAvoy, who also hasn't really been helping that much. He has met expectations in that way, where a 7th D like this, you're expecting to step into the lineup on the bottom pair. But for him to launch up on that left side all the way to the top pair at times and have some decent showings there, that's pretty good. I'm not expecting this guy to shore up the left side, especially when our best defenseman right now on the left side is Zadorov. Yikes. I think a C was perfectly reasonable because he's being asked to do way too much. And a C, I give him a little boost on the C+ because top pair minutes are completely unfair. And he has had some nice moments. Not offensively, but he's been steady in moments. The long-term outlook, he has 1 more year on his contract. He's going to be up and down for the AHL. He might end up just being completely buried in the AHL if we bring in another guy for the left side. So we'll see what happens there. But it's the long-term outlook is exactly what you'd expect. And then he'll walk at the end of the 2 years is my expectation. Cole Koepke. Another C-pluser. The pertinent stats for him: 7 goals, 5 assists in 43 games, a 24-point pace, +9, leading the team in plus-minus. A lot of that plus-minus is from the start of the season, but he's been a traditional fourth-line guy. He defends well, starts majority of his shifts in the defensive zone. In fact, Kastelic, Koepke, and Beecher should all be given that note, is they start as a forward grouping in the defensive zone more than any other forward grouping. So the offensive numbers shouldn't be high. They're fourth line, traditional, defensive situations. That's what they're there for. He empties his bucket on his shifts. Sometimes you don't notice him, but hey, that's the life of a fourth liner. I think he's done a fine job. I really do. I wouldn't say he's high above expectations, but enough to give him a positive grade, which was a C+. The long-term outlook, there is none. If he sticks around as a fourth-line guy, cool. If not, cool. It's one of the first who'll be scratched for additional help as a forward. Someone will take his role, but getting bumped down, and he'll be moved out. So just kind of a 12th, 13th forward guy who's playing his role. Nothing wrong with a player like this, but they aren't adding much to the equation. We have one more C+ guy. I guess this is the grouping for, like, forgiveness, honestly. Because Oesterle and Parker Wotherspoon now are them. Because I wouldn't say either one of them have been, like, above average in their play so much, as they've just been asked to do way too much for what their talent level is. He has 1 assist in 22 games played, Wotherspoon. A 7th defenseman who oftentimes looks like a 7th defenseman, who's frequently being asked to move higher in the lineup out of necessity on that left side. Once again, best defenseman right now on the left side is Zadorov, my God. Again, no reason to get complicated here. He's been fine. He gets the plus for being asked to do more than he can really handle. Unlikely to re-sign at the end of the year, in my opinion. Maybe they keep him down on like a league minimum kind of thing, but he might see if he could try his luck elsewhere to get more playing time. I don't see him being a long-term guy with the Boston Bruins by any means. The next grouping is going to be kind of simple, kind of easy, because it is our C's. You're meeting expectations. You're doing exactly what I thought you would. There's 2 that are meeting expectations right in line with what I thought. The first one, Joonas Korpisalo. 14 games played, 2.86 goals allowed average, and an .892 save percentage. We expected subpar backup goaltending play. We are getting subpar backup goaltending play. The long-term outlook is we are very stuck with this guy unless we attach an asset to move him. He'll live out the life of his contract here. That's not surprising to anyone. The other C is also a quick and easy explanation. Mclaughlin. 2 goals in 12 games, a 13th forward on his best nights. No reason to get all complicated here. Probably doesn't have a future with team. Likely a tweener from AHL to NHL. I mean, he's just a guy who slots in sometimes. Right? He hasn't done anything to make me go, oh, better than expected. He also hasn't done anything to make me think he's worse than expected. Right in line with expectations. Cool. C-. How many C- do we got? We have 4, and you're not going to like any of them. Well, you won't care about one of them, but the other 3, I think I'm going to get a lot of arguments on. Notice there's a lot of like big names that are still down farther on the list. We're really going to disagree on some stuff here. We're just going to talk about it. Andrew Peeke is my first C-. This is the one you probably won't care about. 8 assists in 39 games played. He's fine. I don't have lofty expectations for him, but he's had steady moments and he's had bad moments. He plays a role on a bad penalty kill, which is really where the negative comes in, because otherwise his 5-on-5 he's just kind of an expensive third pairing guy. 2.75 mil. He has another year, so he'll likely stick around and leave in free agency. That's the long-term outlook, but he plays the fact that he's on the penalty kill, which ranks so poorly, is why he gets that little divot there. Other than that, he's just been fine. There's no reason to really harp on the guy, I don't think. Expectations, you know? The next C- is Charlie Coyle. Some of you, I think, are really going to argue in one direction and some in the other, right? I think some people will go, like, yeah, he's been good. He's been good for what he is. And then the people will be like, no, he's been awful. He has 10 goals, 4 assists, and 45 games played, 25-point pace, 3rd on the team in goals, a -6+-. He swapped from the 3rd-line center to the 2nd-line right wing a little while back. This is one of the more difficult grades to give out, in my opinion, because on the one hand, his numbers are really bad and will be a career low through a full season. Like, that's really bad. On the other hand, I thought the move to right wing was a good choice, and he's been more effective in that role. And then I looked at his shooting percentage, which is at 15.6%, which well above his career average. So he's overperforming in the one stat that makes his stat line look okay, right? That kind of saves his stat line, which is the 10 goals. I mean, if you're third on the team in goals, that's a good thing. He has finished a season with a 17% shooting percentage before, so it wouldn't be a career best or anything like that, so it's not ridiculous, but it does point to a pretty scary trajectory if that lowers closer to his career average, because he's already on pace for pretty low numbers. So it's technically a bad grade, right? It's a C-. It's below expectations. But he also has 10 goals while starting more shifts in the defensive zone than any other forward who isn't traditionally on the fourth line. Like, that's where he starts his shifts. So it's technically a bad grade, right? C-, below expectations. But he also has 10 goals while starting more shifts in the defensive zone than any other forward who isn't traditionally a fourth line guy. There's a lot of layers to what's going on with Coyle, right? There's a lot of aspects of his game that you can point to that answer one thing and then make another one a question. This is why it annoyed me so much that writing an article with no stats, with no nuance, just 2 sentences of a blurb about the season without actually going through the reasoning for any of it really bothered me. Really bothered me. All right, I'm going to stop harping on that, but there's just a lot of levels to this. He doesn't deserve a grade that says he's playing to his average, because he's not. I also don't think he should get absolutely smoked because his assignments are on the more difficult side, and he's adjusting a lot as he gets bounced around now. 3C to second right wing. Second right wing is not his traditional. It was in Minnesota. It's not here. His traditional role in this structure. I think Coyle's been all right. I would have loved to give him a higher grade, but I simply can't. So I land on C-, right? Probably has a little bias built in there too. If someone was like he's a D, D+, I'm really not going to push back that much on that one. The long-term outlook, blanket statement of he needs to be better, like everyone else, but he might be a fairly attractive trade deadline piece for teams looking for a third-line boost that can put a better team around him. He has another year on his contract after this one. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that a team comes knocking and the Bruins like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's get some assets out of this. We'll see what happens. The next couple of games are going to determine a lot of that. Our next C-. God, you guys are really going to get mad at me. I don't like when people are mad at me in the comments. I'm soft. David Pastrnak, a C-, not an F, not a D, not a D+, a C-. He has 45 points in 45 games played, 19 goals, 26 assists, a -10 ±, leads the team in points, goals, and assists. 82 points would be his lowest pace since 2021. He has 7 points in his last 5 games, making it look like he's on the right path, which is nice. We've talked about a nagging injury that we aren't entirely certain about, but you just can't look at his overall work and think he's exceeding or even meeting expectations. I think he does get too much flack about the turnovers, especially on a year where the team just keeps shoving this puck into his skates every time he has a scoring opportunity. He does turn the puck over a lot. A lot of superstars do, because they're trying to do a lot with it. The offense on this team is non-existent some nights. Just truly. He has very little to work with and is still a point-per-game guy. You can point to the terrible power play, to the lack of consistency of scoring-wise for the lines that he's on. His inability to work with Elias Lindholm, which I think is a Lindholm thing, not a Pastrnak thing, but that's just me. His inability to work with Brad Marchand, I just don't think that fits very well anymore. I'm making excuses, right? But he's a point-per-game guy on a team that has virtually no offense. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. So again, a C- is where it lands. And this one wasn't really hard for me. I don't think he deserved a D or D+. I don't think he's meeting expectations. C- it was. Didn't seem that complicated. The long-term outlook is he's still a superstar. And if the Bruins can ever bring in other top-line talent, he will push back to a 100-point plateau pretty easily. That being said, it's a pipe dream this year. And while he remains the virtually only big scoring threat on the team, he'll continue to get double-teamed and get snuffed out. You can't do it by yourself unless you are a McDavid-level talent. And no one's saying Pasternak's a McDavid-level talent. He's in the tier right below that because he's brilliant. The last C- is Johnny Beecher. 2 goals, 6 assists through 43 games played, a 16-point pace, 0 on the plus-minus stat. The only reason he's not farther down this list is because my expectations for this guy seem to differ from others for this player quite a bit. I've watched him since the beginning of his collegiate career. He's an excellent skater, strong defensive forward, defensive-minded forward, and an absolute nothing offensively. This is who he is, and who he's been for years. He has 2 points in his past 2 months, one of which is an assist on an empty netter. He's kind of right in line with expectations for me, which is a shutdown fourth-line guy who wins a lot of faceoffs. The low point total would typically garner a much lower grade, but seriously, my expectations for this guy are so unbelievably low offensively that this is right where I kind of saw him being. That's it. He's the only Bruins forward with 40-plus games played under 10 points. And it still doesn't even bother me that much because this is exactly who he is. And exactly who he's been for years. It's not one of those, like, he'll turn, like, the prospect, he'll flip a switch, he'll learn something. Like, no. In college, they thought of him as a potential top-line talent. And then he moved down the lineup because he just could not hack it offensively. Like, that was who he was. He was a defensive stud as a forward. The long-term outlook for it is I'm praying there's a team interested in him as a young center with upside so we can move him at the deadline. If he's not, he's still got a very nice little niche carved out with this team. He's a useful NHL player. I think he'll be moved in and out of the lineup at times as he continues to struggle offensively, but he certainly has a role protecting leads late in a game where we have a lead, which you don't see that often these days. So Beecher gets a C- because my expectations for him were this low. It seems bad. Is that bad? It seems bad. Now we get to the D's, and we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players to go through, 9 of which are still working with the team right now. And we're in the D's. Yikes! Brandon Carlo, a D+. A D+. 1 goal, 4 assists through 45 games played, a 9-point pace, 0 plus-minus, good for 5th on the Bruins for players who have played at least 20 games. That's 0 plus-minus. He has 16 PIMs. I was thinking F. I really was, because of how much we've talked about his struggles this year. The plus-minus, even though I hate the stat, talked me out of it, because he's dead even on it. His 16 PIMs, which would be, puts him on pace for his lowest total across a full 82 games, made me think again. Just keeping it like, okay, maybe not an F. At 5-on-5, there is no Bruins defenseman who starts more of their shifts in the defensive zone. He does it at a whopping 45% of his faceoffs. Starts of his shifts that start with faceoffs, 45% of them. And in the neutral zone, it's another 35%. He leads our team by crazy numbers in these. With the play of our goaltenders and the defensive structure as a whole, Carlo's numbers should look way worse spending all of this time in the defensive zone. I know his mistakes are glaring, which is why he's still getting a fairly low grade, because I do still believe he's not meeting expectations, particularly on the penalty kill, which is, bottom 10 in the league. But he's also the guy in the trenches taking the most difficult assignments. We should go a bit easier on him than we have. I don't think it's an F. He has started rebounding over the past few weeks, I think, even though the losing streak is right there as well, and he's had his mistakes, but I think he's been steadying himself a little bit. It should only get better when he's not playing defenseman roulette on the left side. When Hampus comes back, regardless of who he's playing with, it should solidify a pair, meaning that there's going to be a little more consistency. He's valuable, and an absolute game changer defensively when he's at his best. I'm hoping he can get back to his best. The long-term outlook is they're keeping him around. They want to keep him around because we have seen in the past in a 7-game series where Carlo is in versus Carlo goes out, whoever their top scoring talent is, as soon as Carlo's gone, they pop off every time. Carlo's valuable. He truly is. He takes the most difficult assignments. D+, that's harsh. He's having a bad year. It's just not an F. We have one more D+. We have one more. 15 goals, 18 assists in 45 games played, a 60-point pace, second on the team in points and goals with 32 penalty minutes. But a D+. Brad Marchand. On pace for a fairly uninspiring season. The point totals would be better if this team had any finishing ability whatsoever. He seems to be one of the few Bruins who has a on-ice presence where there's more scoring opportunities for the team than against the team. He's coming back from 3 surgeries over the offseason, so a grade this low seems disingenuous, petty, wrong. Just wrong. Let's be clear. I love Marchand as a player. I think he's actually done a better job on ice than I expected and should be given credit for it. But I'm breaking one of my rules here by adding an off-ice element to it. People aren't going to like this, but Brad Marchand is the captain of this team. A team that has struggled this year for a variety of reasons, but the biggest issue I have with Marchand and his leadership is the amount of games we've watched this year where the Boston Bruins have flat out quit in the middle of a game. We've watched a lot of those. The majority of which were when Monty was coach, and I feel like the effort has certainly improved. And I think Marchand's improving in the leadership role as he tries to fill a massive, gaping hole left by Bergeron and Chara before him. This is unfair, but attitude reflects leadership. Marchand's supposed to be a leader, and we have seen some really unfortunate stuff, some really poor media management. The things they're saying in interviews, it's not been a good vibe. And I'm gonna put Marchand on the stand here. He's gonna be getting docked to a D+ because it's on ice play. I would say C-, C. Although with the surgeries, you'd probably start thinking C+, B-. Like the expectations had to be pretty low for him coming into the season. He's played every game so far. But the leadership aspect has really bothered me, and I think he's improving, and he should be given the opportunity to improve. But this team, man, has had some real stinkers and has looked very unfocused for many of them. I think he should hold a little accountability for that. The long-term outlook here, very hopeful that he re-signs. And it seems very likely that he re-signs with us. If the team continues to crater, of course, we might change on that. But right now, he's still an effective left wing who can be the heart and soul of this team. And D+ sucks, but that's where we're at, in my mind. That's where we're at. To the D's! Yeah, I think most of these you'll agree with. There's one that no one's going to be happy with, but no one's going to be happy with that. I'm the only person on the planet who's going to be happy with that. The first D, we're going to talk about Elias Lindholm's D. 7 goals, 14 assists, and 45 games played, a 38-point pace. Tied for third on the team in scoring, 54.6% face-off win percentage. Excellent win percentage of the face-offs. My expectations were low, but holy hell. It's well documented that he's been completely invisible offensively, and he's been getting worse year to year to year over the past few years. He's gotten more playing time with the best wingers the Bruins have to offer, which, granted, isn't amazing, than any other center, and has completely looked out of place next to all of them. He's not controlling the puck well. He isn't finding opportunities to shoot. He's not succeeded in any aspect of the offensive game whatsoever, and he's third on the team in scoring. I mean, that's kind of about the team as a whole, right? Then there's the defensive side of things, which is actually where the grade more so comes in, because my expectations for him as an offensive center were extremely low. A 38-point pace is bad, but defensively, holy crap, dude. This was what you were supposed to be good at. Like, this was the stuff that I was like, okay, maybe he can be a second-line center. No. Not only, face-offs aside, not only has he been below a average standard defensively, he's actually been an active liability for many, many games. He doesn't cover the center of the ice well. He's slow on the back check. He's constantly getting lost chasing the defensive zone. He hasn't learned the Bruins structure. Like, he just frankly has not. This video concept forced me to take a deeper look into every individual's year. As you can tell by, we're at 37 minutes of recording. There's going to be some editing here to take that down. But this was an arduous task to go through all of this. A task of love. But arduous all the same. I didn't realize it's gotten this bleak with Lindholm. Defensively, he's just non-existent. The only reason he isn't an F is because my expectations were truly very low for him going into the season. I thought he could be a slightly above average 2C. Right now, he's looking like a 3C at best. The long-term outlook is awful too. Because the best case scenario is probably a Coyle-esque contract. We find some centers to put in front of him, and he becomes an overpaid third-line center. But with the right night-to-night matchups, with the being lowered down in the lineup, he can succeed in that role. We knew the contract would age poorly, but damn, it's looking way worse than we thought initially. This is tough. There's still a lot of time left of that contract, so you got to believe, just for your own mental safety, that he's going to rebound, he's going to look good. But it's been a really bad first half for him. Really bad. Another D. This is the one that no one's going to like. Matthew Poitras. Let it soak in. Let the D soak in a little bit. You notice I'm just going to keep making that pun over and over again. 1 goal, 3 assists in 14 games played at 23-point pace across 82 games. This grade isn't really fair, right? He looked good to start the season, even though his line mates were consistently shooting the puck into the stands every time he gave them a prime scoring opportunity. He was creative and clever. His line consistently outchanced their opposition, even though he did start a fair amount of his shifts in the offensive zone. He wasn't a liability at the other end of the ice. He was responsible enough. He was also moved out of the lineup to work on his overall game, a decision I still disagree with. And he hasn't been able to work his way back into it, which is a decision I still disagree with. He's close to a point per game in the AHL, but there must be something that's keeping him there. And no, it's not because it's safer down there. I plead with you to understand that the AHL is not a safer league. But there must be something that is keeping him down there. There must be something. This is the moment that the dumb YouTube guy has to admit that he does not know everything. I disagree with so much that has been done over the past 7 months. But Poitras losing his spot and being unable to reclaim it is a failure that I have to assume is due to something with his play that I am not seeing. He doesn't get an F because I already don't think a D is super fair. But for his expectation for this season, him being unable to stay in the lineup and unable to get back in the lineup, that's a failure and should be considered a failure. Again, there's some nuance there. And if you want to sit there and go, absolutely not, that's a failure on Sweeney and whoever is the acting coach, fine. Like, that's a reasonable opinion. But where I'm at, looking at it holistically, Poitras has failed to stay in the lineup. Again, he's going to be fine. The long-term outlook here is I'm hoping he becomes a really strong middle six center, maybe even a true second-line center. I doubt he stays down in the AHL for the rest of the season. I have a feeling that through the trade deadline, there might be some space opened up for him to jump back up. I hate having such a low grade for him, but there's a little bit of an honesty factor there of what was his expectation and what has he been able to do. And he's in the AHL right now. The last D is Pavel Zacha. 9 goals, 12 assists in 45 games played, a 38-point pace. A lot of guys at a 38-point pace. 0 power play goals. On pace for his lowest point total since 2021. I could see opinions for Zacha ranging from F to C+, honestly. On one hand, he's had to step into the 1C role because Elias Lindholm's been that bad. He has a lower cap hit and has a decent chemistry with Pasta. On the other hand, his point totals are abysmal for having almost all of your shifts with Pastrnak. He's not an impactful player on defense, and he's struggled to find any consistency across his game. The grade really comes down to the same thing all the forwards are struggling with: chance creation and finishing. He simply hasn't displayed enough firepower through this year. He's well below the pace of previous years and is on a power play unit that is an active detriment to the team. I tried to find a reason to bump him up. I really did try to find a reason to get him closer to a C. And you could argue, if everyone's failing at the same category, then it shouldn't be graded so harshly. But no, you're a top 6 forward on an NHL team. You're paid to score points, and you aren't doing that. Full stop. You get a bad grade. This is below his expectations. The long-term outlook, he stays a versatile middle 6 winger. There's value in that. But right now, it's not enough, and he's well behind his previous standard. He'll be sticking around, and I hope he does, frankly. I really do. The D-. There's one D-. I think everyone should be very proud of me. I did not give Elias Lindholm an F when I've been very vocal about how much I don't like him. And I didn't give Nikita Zadorov an F. A D-. He has 2 goals, 8 assists in 45 games played, an 18-point pace, somehow a +6 on the plus-minus, and he has 82 penalty minutes. An absolute disaster of a contract. I mean, we knew it when he signed it. He takes 1 billion penalties. 1 billion. Which we knew when we signed him. So there's that. He's not an effective defender despite his size and reach. He makes baffling decisions frequently, usually resulting in him coasting through the defensive zone while the opponent sets up for a backdoor tap-in. He doesn't clear the net front well, which is something that I really thought he would be effective at. He actually starts in the offensive zone just about as often as he starts in the defensive zone, so it's not like you can point to the difficulty of his matchups, which he's usually not taking the more difficult assignments, and it does kind of explain his plus-minus then if he's starting as frequently offensive zone as he is in the defensive zone. I do like him in the offensive zone too. I think he has a really nice shot. I think he skates the blue line well. I think he gets the puck in deep. Those are all compliments I can give him. But his work in the defensive zone has been abysmal. It's been awful. It's been so bad. So he gets a D-. I mean, again, skates well, has a nice shot. I've been told he skates the puck out of danger well and is an effective puck clearer. Have not seen that at all. My expectations were low. They should have been lower. The long-term outlook is we're stuck with a $5 million third pairing defender for 5 more years. And this is like taking into account that he's had better games. Like, there have been some games where he's looked better. But this is a brutal contract. This is really bad. The thing is, it wouldn't even be that bad if it was just, like, the one. But we've got, like, 4 really bad contracts right now. The Fs. Man, the Fs suck. There's 4 of them. And I really like every single one of these players. But they have an F for a reason. The first one is Mason Lohrei. 2 goals, 17 assists, and 40 games played, a 39-point pace, second leading scorer for our defenseman, a team worst -15 goal differential. So a lot going on in this one. He's got a nice point total, that's good, but he's fallen short in way too many other areas. Remember, I'm grading on this season, not his potential, which I still believe is very high. He's been an abject disaster defensively. He's on the ice for a ton of goals against, and is all too commonly putting his D-zone partner in poor situations. There's a huge opportunity when Hampus went down to play higher in the lineup, but, I mean, he hasn't played well enough to stick. Oftentimes muting McAvoy's effect on the game, not that McAvoy's been much better, as he tries to cover for Lohrei when they're paired. He also had the opportunity to jump on the top power play unit, but again, his situational awareness and attempts at doing too much backfired too often to give him that job in a long-term way. I'm very high on Lohrei. I think he's going to be a very good offensive defenseman. But in a season where he has been given every opportunity to succeed in several areas, he's fallen well short in every single one of them. This has been an awful, awful season for Lohrei. It's a little weird to put him like this because this is his first full season in the NHL. And he's still a forward who was transitioning to a defenseman. There are growing pains, and this is not all that surprising. He's going to be fine. But so far, he's been such a nightmare defensively and is on the wrong end of so many chances. Like, statistically, it's not even that. It's also all the things that the goaltending, which hasn't been great, has still bailed him out of. I can't tell you how many times a game I watch and I go, Lohrei, what was that? Over and over and over again. The point totals are nice. The defensive play is so bad that he's down at an F. At least he's been able to stay in the lineup. Poitras doesn't... I feel weird about having Poitras have a higher grade than he does. But at least with Poitras, it was more feasible that he gets moved out of the lineup. There's no one on this left side. Lohrei is needed, and Lohrei has been floundering. So, an F it is. The other defenseman on this list of Fs is Charlie McAvoy. I know. It's the 9.5 million man. 5 goals, 15 assists in 45 games played, 38-point pace, 44 penalty minutes, a +2, plus-minus. By the standard he has set, and his contract has set, this is a failure of a first half. He is on pace to set a career high in penalty minutes. He's quarterbacking the second worst power play in the league, and plays a decent role in why it's so bad, to the point where they've started looking for in-house solutions at that position. He starts more shifts in the offensive zone than any other defenseman, but hasn't taken advantage of it. He does lead our defenseman in points and is playing the tougher competition routinely, but if we are holding him to the standard he should be at as a $9.5 million star right-handed defenseman, this has been about as bad a start to the year as he's had. He's had a revolving door on his left, and a lot of this likely stems from that. He's had a revolving door on his left, and a lot of this probably stems from that, but he needs to be better in every facet of his game. We need much more from him if we're going to be successful, and it's been a really, really bad first half. Again, it's not all about the box scores, point totals, things like that. Sometimes, even though you have 20 points, you look bad. And he looks bad. Long-term outlook, I'm expecting a bounce back. I really am. And he's had some nice games, so it's not like it's that much of a stretch. The long run, he'll be fine. He's not going to be some $9.5 million dead weight. That's just not what he is. He is still a star right-handed defenseman. And he's going through the hardest assignments every night. But he hasn't looked good enough. I just find it really hard to believe that he stays at this level for the rest of the year. But no, it's been a failure of a first half for Charlie McAvoy. Truly. 2 more. Trent Frederic. I don't think I have to explain this that much. 6 goals, 7 assists in 45 games played, a 23-point pace. Somehow hasn't gotten scratched yet. He's a -9, which is 3rd worst on the team, and averages far less ice time as the ones ahead of him. He is on pace for his lowest point total in 3 years, his lowest plus-minus of his career, while potentially matching his career high in penalty minutes, while only having 3 fights so far. He was a complete non-factor on the wing, and it's gotten even worse with him at center. Even when his line is performing well, such as recently, where it looks like they're in the offensive zone more and getting more chances, it is typically not because of his play. You are noticing the wingers. I'm not saying he hasn't had a single good game, but you can count on one hand how many good games he's had. This has been an absolute awful first half of the year for Trent Frederic. The long-term outlook feels like the most likely thing to happen is going to be he's going to get traded. My assumption is a my problem for your problem kind of trade. The hope is he starts to wake up for a few weeks so he can be moved for something a little more exciting. He's a lock to stay in the lineup because they want to keep his value up, I guess, but I think that's a mistake too and is only hurting his value. But we saw how Geekie responded after getting scratched a little bit and kind of having a sit-down conversation with the brass, but they refused to do it with Frederic. I don't get it, but an F feels very well-deserved here. And the final and the predictable bottom of the list. I know I said that like the grade categories aren't in any sort of order once you get into them, but it does feel like he's the F-iest F. Jeremy Swayman. 32 games played, 2.91 goals against average, 26th out of goalies with at least 20 starts, an .895 save percentage, 29th out of goalies with at least 20 games played, minus 5.8 goals saved above average in all situations, according to Natural Stat Trick, 30th out of goalies with at least 20 starts. How can the grade be anything else? Seriously, how can it be anything else? The last few starts have been way better, way better. He looks like he's rounding back into form, which is awesome. And I don't expect this grade to stick to this at the season's end. I really don't. But he ranks near the bottom in pretty much every statistic for starting goaltenders league-wide. Not only has this season been far below his standard, but far below his contract standard. You know, the one. You know the contract. We talked about it a lot. When he talked about setting the market for his fellow goaltenders, I don't think he meant to set it back 15 years. But that's kind of what he did. The long-term outlook, it's going to be fine. The contract will be fine. He will be a capable number one for many years. But right now, this has been ugly. Ugly, ugly. And he deserves a ton of the blame. It hasn't just been the team in front of him. He has been bad. Both those things can be true. Here's the thing. This seems like a very negative video, but it's not. Because when you're at the bottom, where can you go? Up. There's a ton of players that are underperforming their expectations. Some of them will finish the season doing so. Some of them won't. That's just the way it is. This isn't like that negative. It's just a snapshot of where we are. right? I don't think any of these grades were things that you sat there and went, that's outlandish. That's ridiculous. How dare you? Right? Maybe I'm wrong on that. But this is kind of the reality of the situation. There's a lot of runway left. Things can turn around. All of a sudden, things click and boom, you've got a competitive team. But right now, friggin' yikes, dude. This is nasty, gross, bad. There's a lot of players underperforming. So I'm going to be waiting for them all to bounce back at the same exact time. An 11-game win streak, easy. Get us back in the conversation. Book it. Go Bees. Go Bees! And now it's time to say thank you to the high-quality inspectors. I appreciate each and every one of you. There's over 100 of you at this point. And I love doing these thank yous at the end, but I think we're reaching such a volume that I have to rethink this strategy because you're all so incredible and so supportive. But this is getting really long, and there's got to be a better way, right? But let's start the thank yous, of course, with the top line tier. Dampen, Chris and Erica, Negev79, Trial Exotic, Jeff McGugan, Quackin' Platypus, Andrew Peterson, Sean Kreider, JM, Zenin Noel DeGuy, Donald Shelton, Anakin Palpatine, The Rat 63, Lola Cattingsworth, EKM Productions, Moonlighter TV, Big Bad Bruin, The Bugman, Adam Ella, Jeff with a G, Tommy Braga, Roland 22, GD Viperworks, Len Cruz, Brock Nope, Han Slomo, Coach D, The Atomic Lizard, Bradley Johnson, Brett Arney, Pincent, and Nick Zatrullo. Thank you so much, each and every one of you. You're absolute legends of this channel, and you're very appreciated. And now, of course, to our all-star tier members. Lorenzo Wood, Jake Brower, Penny Pasta, Levi Catalani, Boston Stringler, Bagel, JG's 12, Mark S., Jacob Pratt, Nightmare Eco, John Kirk, Ann Hustis, Joel, Heil E. Coyote, Darren Woodbury, Abraxion, Michael DePaulo, Wolf Warrior, Vinny, Adrian Winter, Tupton D. Tashi, Bruin Smash, DeKingery, The Only Newts, A Tasty Snack, Dutes 42, and Jeremy. Absolute stallions, every single one. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for being a part of the channel. I cannot express my gratitude. Go Bees.